I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would give up her career for a man. My mother had drilled it into me since childhood. Never depend on anyone but yourself, Evelyn. She'd repeat this mantra while applying makeup at 5 a.m. before her hospital shift. Exhaustion etched into the lines around her eyes that deepened with each passing year after my father left. Boston winters were always brutal, but January 2023 felt particularly merciless. The wind sliced through my wool coat as I hurried across the parking garage to my car after another 14-hour day at Meridian Pharmaceuticals. At 32, I was the youngest senior research scientist on our oncology team. The promotion had come with a corner office, a substantial salary bump, and increasingly impossible expectations. My phone buzzed as I fumbled with my keys. It was Marcus. "Hey, I know you're probably just leaving. Just wanted to check if we're still on for dinner." His voice had that hopeful edge I'd come to recognize, the one that said he understood I might cancel again, but was trying not to sound disappointed in advance. "I'm heading home now," I said, feeling the familiar weight of guilt. This would be the third dinner this week I'd managed not to reschedule. "Give me 45 minutes. Take your time. I've got that roast in the oven like you like." Marcus and I had been together for 2 years. He was everything my previous boyfriends weren't. Patient, understanding about my work schedule, and endearingly enthusiastic about the smallest things. When we'd met at a mutual friends gallery opening, he'd spent 30 minutes explaining the evolution of his craft beer company with such passion that I found myself captivated, despite having zero interest in hops fermentation. By the time I arrived at our apartment, technically his apartment that I'd gradually moved into, the aroma of garlic and rosemary enveloped me. Marcus stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, beard neatly trimmed, plating what looked like a restaurant-quality meal. "Just in time," he smiled, leaning in for a kiss. "How was your day?" I sighed, dropping my bag. "Dr. Winters rejected our proposal again. Says the methodology isn't innovative enough." "That's the third time, right?" "What does she expect? Some miracle breakthrough that nobody's thought of before." "Basically." I kicked off my heels, accepting the glass of Cabernet he offered. Meanwhile, Jensen Biotech announced promising results for a similar approach last week. Marcus frowned. "Your team has been working on this for what, 18 months now? That's ridiculous. Welcome to corporate research. It's all politics." I took a long sip of wine. "Speaking of which, how was your meeting with the distributor?" His face lit up. "Amazing. They want to take Summit Brewing statewide, every Whole Foods in Massachusetts, plus a bunch of specialty shops." "Marcus, that's huge." I genuinely felt happy for him. After 4 years of struggling to get his craft brewery off the ground, working 16-hour days while bartending on weekends to make ends meet, he was finally seeing success. "There's more," he said, setting our plates down at the small dining table. "They're interested in expanding to New York and Connecticut if things go well here. But the best part," he paused, clearly savoring the moment. "I got a call from Austin." "Austin? As in Texas?" He nodded, barely containing his excitement. "Remember Ryan, my old roommate from college? He's been working with this restaurant group that's exploding down there. They're opening this massive food hall and craft beer garden concept. They want Summit to be their anchor brewery." "Wow," I said, trying to process what this meant. "That sounds amazing. When would this happen?" That's what I wanted to talk about. He reached for my hand across the table. "They want me there by March to oversee the setup. It's basically my dream opportunity, Ev. The Austin craft scene is booming, and this would put Summit on the map nationally." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "You're moving to Texas?" "I'm hoping we're moving to Texas," he corrected gently. "I know it's sudden and your career is here, but what if this could be good for both of us? You're miserable at Meridian. You've been talking about wanting a change." "A change, yes, but..." I trailed off, stabbing at my roasted potatoes. Leaving Boston? Leaving my position? The idea was simultaneously terrifying and strangely liberating. "Just think about it," Marcus said. "Austin has an incredible biotech scene. With your credentials, you could write your own ticket. And we'd be starting fresh together." That night, lying awake while Marcus slept soundly beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to imagine a different life. I thought about the last performance review where my boss had praised my dedication while suggesting I needed to show more leadership potential, corporate speak for working even longer hours. I thought about the project I was passionate about being repeatedly sidelined for more commercially promising ventures. I thought about the gray Boston winters stretching endlessly before me. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe we both needed this change. 2 months later, I submitted my resignation. My colleagues were shocked. Dr. Winters actually seemed concerned, offering a substantial raise and more project autonomy. But by then, my mind was made up. Marcus and I were going to Austin. He would launch Summit Brewing in the Texas market, and I would find a position with a research institute, or perhaps one of the emerging biotech startups in the area. "You're making a mistake," my mother said bluntly when I called to tell her. "Never hitch your wagon to someone else's dream, Evelyn." "It's not like that, Mom. This is an opportunity for both of us." Her silence spoke volumes. We arrived in Austin in early March. The city was everything people had described: vibrant, quirky, full of energy. We found a beautiful apartment in East Austin, walking distance to the food hall where Summit would be the centerpiece. Marcus threw himself into work immediately, overseeing construction, ordering equipment, hiring staff. I sent out resumes and networked at biotech meetups, confident that something would materialize soon. By May, Summit Brewing's Austin location was taking shape beautifully. Marcus was thriving, making connections throughout the local craft beer community, getting written up in food blogs and local magazines. He'd hired a talented head brewer from a renowned Colorado brewery, and together, they were developing Texas-inspired brews that were generating serious buzz. My job search, meanwhile, was proving more challenging than anticipated. Austin's biotech scene, while growing, was nothing like Boston's. The positions available were either entry-level or required specialized expertise in areas outside my experience. I had a few promising interviews, but nothing concrete. "It'll happen," Marcus reassured me one evening as we sat on our balcony, watching the sunset paint the skyline. "The right opportunity is coming. In the meantime, maybe this is a chance to reassess what you really want." He didn't say it outright, but I knew what he was suggesting. For years, I'd occasionally mentioned the idea of pursuing a different direction, perhaps teaching, or focusing on research areas that had always fascinated me but weren't commercially viable. Meridian had channeled me into oncology research, because that's where the money was, not because it was my passion. "Maybe you're right," I admitted, letting myself consider the possibility. "I've been so focused on finding the same kind of position I had before." Marcus squeezed my hand. "You followed me here. The least I can do is support you figuring out what you really want." And he did support me, financially and emotionally, as weeks stretched into months. I volunteered at a local science education nonprofit, teaching workshops to underprivileged kids. I took online courses in computational biology, an area I'd always wanted to explore further. For the first time in years, I felt intellectually stimulated without the crushing pressure of corporate deadlines. By the time Summit Brewing's Austin location opened in July with massive fanfare, I had begun consulting for a small research institute focused on rare genetic disorders, work that paid less than half my Boston salary, but engaged me in ways my previous job never had. "To new beginnings," Marcus toasted on opening night, as we clinked glasses in the packed beer garden. The space was stunning, industrial chic with warm wood accents, string lights overhead, and Summit's distinctive mountain logo prominently displayed. Local reporters circulated, taking photos and interviewing Marcus, who looked happier than I'd ever seen him. I smiled, genuinely happy for his success, trying to ignore the nagging voice, one that sounded suspiciously like my mother's, wondering if I'd made the right choice after all. The first sign of trouble came in October, though I didn't recognize it then. Marcus and I were having dinner at our favorite neighborhood restaurant when his phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, his expression shifting subtly before he turned the phone face down. "Everything okay?" I asked, noticing the tension in his shoulders. "Just Ryan being dramatic about some supplier issues," he said, forcing a smile. "Nothing I can't handle tomorrow." Later that night, I woke to find his side of the bed empty. Through the bedroom doorway, I could see him at the dining table, hunched over his laptop, the blue light illuminating his furrowed brow as he scrutinized what looked like financial spreadsheets. I should have asked more questions then. But Marcus had always handled the business side of Summit, and I'd been so absorbed in my own professional reinvention that I didn't press when he deflected my concerns in the following weeks. "Just growing pains," he'd say. "Every new business deals with cash flow challenges." November brought unusually cold weather to Austin and increasingly frequent emergency meetings for Marcus. He started leaving before dawn and returning after midnight. The vibrant energy that had characterized our first months in Texas gradually replaced by a tense preoccupation. One evening, I came home from the Research Institute to find him sitting in the dark living room, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand. "Marcus, what's wrong?" He looked up, his eyes hollow with a despair I'd never seen before. "It's falling apart, Ev. All of it." Over the next 2 hours, the truth spilled out. The restaurant group that had brought Summit to Austin was in financial trouble. They'd overextended themselves with the food hall concept, and costs had spiraled far beyond projections. To make matters worse, they'd been delaying payments to vendors, including Summit, for months. "Ryan kept promising the money was coming," Marcus said, his voice ragged. "Said they were just waiting for the next round of investment. I believed him because I wanted to believe him." "How bad is it?" I asked, my stomach nodding. "Bad." He took a shaky breath. "We've got suppliers threatening legal action. The new brewing equipment isn't paid off. I've been covering payroll out of our personal savings for the last month." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Our savings? How much, Marcus?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "Almost all of it." The room seemed to tilt. Our savings represented most of what I'd managed to put away during my years at Meridian, money that was supposed to be our safety net while I rebuilt my career. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I thought I could fix it," he said miserably. "Every day, I thought something would break our way. A new investor, a distribution deal, something. And now?" He shook his head slowly. "The restaurant group filed for bankruptcy protection yesterday. They're shutting down the food hall. We have 30 days to vacate." The next few weeks were a nightmare of legal consultations, creditor negotiations, and agonizing decisions. Marcus had leveraged everything for this opportunity, including, I discovered, taking a second mortgage on his Boston condo that we'd been renting out. Summit's Massachusetts operation was stable, but couldn't absorb the massive losses from Austin. Through it all, I tried to be supportive. This was the man who had stood by me during my career transition, who had never once complained about being the primary breadwinner while I found my footing. But as the full extent of our financial devastation became clear, I couldn't help feeling a growing resentment. I had given up everything to follow his dream, and he had gambled away our security without even consulting me. The breaking point came just before Christmas. I returned from work to find Marcus packing his clothes. "What are you doing?" I asked, though I already knew. "I have to go back to Boston," he said, not looking up. "It's the only way to save what's left of Summit. I can move back into the condo, run the original brewery, try to rebuild." "And what about me? What about us?" He finally met my gaze, his eyes red-rimmed and defeated. "I can't ask you to come back, Ev. You're finally doing work you love. You're building something here, so you're just leaving? After I gave up everything to come here with you?" "I never asked you to give up everything," he said quietly, and the words stung like a slap. "That was your choice." The truth of it only made me angrier. "My choice based on what you told me, based on promises about this amazing opportunity that was supposed to change both our lives." "I believed in it too," he said, his voice breaking. "I was wrong. I failed. Is that what you want to hear?" We argued for hours, dredging up resentments I hadn't even realized I was harboring. By morning, an unbridgeable chasm had opened between us. 3 days later, Marcus was gone, leaving me alone in an apartment I could barely afford in a city where I had no family or close friends. January in Austin was nothing like Boston's brutal winters, but it felt colder somehow. I threw myself into work, taking on additional consulting projects to make ends meet. I downsized to a tiny studio apartment and sold most of our furniture. My mother's words echoed relentlessly. "Never depend on anyone but yourself." The irony wasn't lost on me. I had left a prestigious career to follow a man across the country, only to end up alone, starting over from scratch. But as weeks turned to months, something unexpected happened. The Research Institute, impressed with my work, offered me a full-time position leading a small team investigating novel approaches to treating rare genetic disorders. The salary was modest compared to Meridian, but the work was deeply fulfilling. Moreover, a side project I'd been tinkering with, an algorithm for predicting drug interactions with specific genetic markers, caught the attention of the Institute's director. He connected me with a local biotech incubator that provided resources for promising innovations. By spring, I was spending evenings and weekends developing what was evolving into a potentially valuable research tool. Marcus and I spoke occasionally. He was living in his Boston condo, working to stabilize the original Summit Brewing location. Our conversations were cordial but strained, both of us carefully avoiding any mention of a shared future. By mutual unspoken agreement, we were on indefinite pause, neither officially broken up nor actively together. In May, almost exactly 1 year after I'd been frantically job hunting in a new city, I received an unexpected email from Dr. Helena Rivera, a renowned researcher I'd met at a conference months earlier. She was leading a new initiative at the University of Texas focused precisely on the intersection of genetics and personalized medicine, the area where my algorithm showed promise. "We should talk," her email concluded. "Your work aligns perfectly with our research direction." 2 weeks later, I was hired as a senior researcher with the university program, with substantial resources to develop my algorithm and the freedom to continue my work with the Rare Disease Institute. The position came with a salary that nearly matched what I'd been making at Meridian, but with autonomy I'd never experienced in corporate research. On the evening after I signed the contract, I sat on the small balcony of my new apartment, watching the sunset with a glass of wine, not Marcus's favorite Cabernet, but a Texas Viognier I'd discovered on my own. My phone buzzed with a text. "Marcus, heard about your new position from Kim. Congratulations, Ev. You deserve it." I stared at the message for a long moment before replying, "Me. Thank you. How are things in Boston?" His response came quickly. "Marcus. Stable. Not thriving. Not failing. Thinking about selling the brewery, actually. Got an offer from a local restaurant group. Me. Wow. End of an era. How do you feel about that?" Marcus. "Honestly, relieved. I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About us. I built my whole identity around Summit. When it failed, I felt like I failed as a person." I took a deep breath, feeling an unexpected surge of empathy. I knew exactly what he meant. For years, I'd defined myself by my position at Meridian, measuring my worth by promotions and project successes. Me. "I understand that better than you might think." We texted back and forth for hours that night, more openly than we'd communicated in months. There was no talk of reconciliation or future plans, just honest reflection on the paths that had brought us together and then apart. As spring turned to summer, I found myself thriving in ways I hadn't anticipated. My research was progressing rapidly, attracting attention and grant funding. I'd made genuine friends among my colleagues. I'd even started dating casually. Nothing serious, but enough to know that life continued beyond the relationship I'd thought would be forever. In July, exactly 1 year after Summit's grand opening and subsequent collapse, I received another unexpected message, this time from a Silicon Valley biotech firm interested in licensing my algorithm. The terms they proposed were staggering, including not just an upfront payment, but ongoing royalties and a consulting role that would allow me to continue my university research. That night, I called the one person who would truly appreciate the magnitude of this development. "Evelyn?" Marcus sounded surprised to hear my voice rather than see my text. "Hey," I said, suddenly nervous. "Is this a good time to talk?" "Of course. What's up?" As I explained the licensing deal, I could hear the genuine happiness in his voice. "That's incredible, Ev. I always knew you were brilliant, but this is next level. I couldn't have done it without coming to Austin," I admitted, "without everything that happened." A pause stretched between us. "Even the bad parts?" he finally asked. "Even those," I said softly. "Maybe especially those. Sometimes life's most profound changes happen so gradually, you don't notice them until you're standing in a completely different landscape, wondering how you arrived there. Other times, The shift is sudden. A phone call, a diagnosis, a chance encounter that redirects your entire trajectory. For me, it was a crisp October morning when I found myself standing in front of a small commercial building in East Austin, key in hand, about to make the biggest professional gamble of my life. The licensing deal with the Silicon Valley firm had exceeded all expectations. My algorithm was now being integrated into their flagship genetic testing platform, generating royalties that surpassed my university salary. I could have simply continued along this comfortable path, respected researcher by day, increasingly wealthy passive earner by night. Instead, I was about to open the doors to Helix Bioanalytics, my own research laboratory and consulting firm. "You're sure about this?" asked Nadia, my former colleague at the Research Institute who had agreed to join me as Chief Research Officer. She stood beside me, her expression a mixture of excitement and trepidation that probably mirrored my own. "Absolutely not," I laughed, turning the key. But when has certainty ever led to anything interesting? The space was modest. 4 research stations, a small conference room, and an office we'd share, but it was ours. The university had agreed to let me continue my research program as an affiliated scientist, and 2 of my graduate students had asked to follow me. We had 3 consulting contracts lined up, including an ongoing relationship with the Silicon Valley firm, Dr. Evans would be proud, Nadia said, referring to our mentor at the Research Institute. "Though he still thinks you're crazy for leaving academia." "Academia will always be there," I replied, running my hand along the empty lab counter that would soon hold our equipment. This might not be. As we set up the lab over the next few weeks, I couldn't help reflecting on the symmetry. Almost 2 years earlier, I had watched Marcus prepare to launch Summit Brewing in this same city, with the same mixture of terror and exhilaration I now felt. I understood, in retrospect, his obsessive attention to every detail, his late nights and early mornings. The weight of creating something from nothing, of being responsible not just for your own success, but for the livelihoods of others, was both heavier and more invigorating than I'd imagined. Marcus and I still communicated regularly, our relationship having evolved into a friendship that, while different from what we'd shared before, held its own value. He had indeed sold Summit Brewing to a Boston restaurant group, using the proceeds to pay off his debts and make a fresh start. He'd moved to Portland, Oregon, where he was working as a consultant for craft breweries, lending his expertise without the all-consuming responsibility of ownership. "How's the empire building going?" he asked during one of our video calls, a couple of weeks after Helix opened. "Hardly an empire," I laughed, angling my laptop to show him the small lab. "But it's going well. We just got our second NIH small business grant." "That's fantastic," he said, and I could tell he meant it. "You know, it's funny. When everything fell apart in Austin, I thought I'd failed at the only thing I was good at. Turns out I'm actually better at helping other people build their breweries than I was at running my own." "I get that," I nodded. "Sometimes the skills that make you good at the work aren't the same ones you need to build a business around it." He studied me through the screen. "You seem different, Ev. Happier." "I am," I realized. Terrified half the time, but happier. "Any regrets?" he asked. And I knew he wasn't just talking about Helix. I considered the question seriously. "About us, you mean?" He nodded. "I regret how things ended," I said carefully. "But not the journey. I wouldn't be here without all of it, the good and the bad." His smile was tinged with sadness. "That's a very diplomatic answer." "It's an honest one," I insisted. "What about you? Any regrets?" "Too many to count," he admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. "But the biggest was not being honest with you when things started going south. I was so afraid of disappointing you, of admitting I'd failed, that I made everything worse. We both made mistakes," I said softly. The conversation shifted to other topics, but that exchange stayed with me for days afterward. There was a time when I'd been so angry at Marcus, so resentful of the position his failure had put me in. Yet now, with the perspective of time and my own success, I could see our story differently. His dream had brought me to Austin, but my resilience had kept me here. His failure had forced me to stand on my own, but my own choices had determined where I would go from there. By December, Helix was growing faster than I'd anticipated. We hired 2 more researchers and moved Nadia into her own office. The university partnership expanded to include a joint research program on personalized medicine approaches for underserved populations. I was working longer hours than I ever had at Meridian, but with a sense of purpose that made the time fly. "You need to delegate more," my mother advised during her first visit to Austin. She had finally retired from nursing and, to my surprise, had embraced travel with enthusiasm. "You've built something impressive here, Evelyn, but you'll burn out if you try to do everything yourself," says the woman who raised me single-handedly while working full-time, I retorted, pouring her another glass of wine as we sat in my new condo, a spacious 2-bedroom with a view of downtown that I'd purchased with my licensing proceeds. "And look how that turned out," she said dryly. "I pushed everyone away, including most chances at happiness, because I couldn't bear to depend on anyone." I stared at her, shocked by the admission. My mother had never acknowledged any regrets about her fiercely independent life. She met my gaze steadily. "Don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm proud of what you've built, and you were right not to follow that young man back to Boston when everything fell apart. But independence and isolation aren't the same thing, Evelyn. Don't make my mistakes." Her words echoed in my mind as January brought a new year and unexpected news. The Silicon Valley firm that had licensed my algorithm wanted to acquire Helix outright. The offer was staggering, enough money that I could fund any research I wanted for the rest of my career, with or without institutional support. "What are you going to do?" Nadia asked when I shared the news, her expression unreadable. "I don't know," I admitted. "What do you think?" She considered for a moment. "I think most people would take the money and run. But you're not most people. Neither are you," I pointed out. "This affects your future too." "True," she nodded, "but I followed you here because I believe in what we're building. The question is whether you still want to be the one building it." I took the weekend to think, hiking along the Greenbelt and sitting for hours in coffee shops, weighing options. On Sunday evening, I found myself driving to the site where Summit Brewing's Austin location had briefly existed. The food hall had eventually reopened under new management with different vendors. Nothing remained of Marcus's dream, except my memories. Standing there, watching people enjoy the space that had represented both promise and devastation, I realized something important. The greatest gift Marcus had given me wasn't bringing me to Austin, or supporting me while I found my footing. It was showing me, unintentionally through his failure and our subsequent breakup, that I was capable of creating my own path, of rebuilding from scratch, of transforming setback into opportunity. Monday morning, I called the Silicon Valley firm and declined their acquisition offer, but proposed an expanded partnership instead. By the end of the week, we had negotiated terms that would provide Helix with substantial funding while maintaining our independence and research direction. That evening, I texted Marcus. "Me. Just turned down an acquisition offer that would have made me obscenely wealthy. Pretty sure my mother thinks I've lost my mind." His reply came minutes later. "Marcus, welcome to the Making Questionable Financial Decisions in Favor of Passion Projects Club. Membership is painful, but never boring." I laughed out loud. "Me. Any wisdom from a veteran member?" Marcus. "Just this. The money will come and go. The knowledge that you stayed true to what matters to you, that's priceless." As I sat on my balcony watching the Austin skyline light up against the darkening sky, I reflected on the strange, unpredictable path that had brought me here. 2 years ago, I had quit my job for my boyfriend, following his dream across the country. Then he had lost everything, including me, while I had somehow found myself, stronger, more resilient, and more fulfilled than I had ever been. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to support Marcus's vision, I had discovered my own. In the aftermath of his failure, I had found my greatest success. There was no triumph in this realization, no vindication, just a quiet appreciation for life's unexpected turns and the growth that comes from navigating them. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Marcus, I'm actually going to be in Austin next month, consulting for a new brewery opening on the east side. Would be good to catch up in person if you're open to it." I smiled, feeling neither the sting of old wounds nor the flutter of rekindled romance, just the warmth of connection with someone who had been an important part of my journey. "Me. I'd like that. Let me know when you're in town." Sometimes what we think we want isn't what we need. Sometimes losing everything is the first step to gaining something better. Sometimes the people who change our lives the most are not the ones who stay in them forever. And sometimes, just sometimes, the path forward becomes clear only when we stop trying to follow someone else's map and start drawing our own. I took one last look at the Austin skyline, the city that had become home in ways Boston never had, and went inside to prepare for tomorrow. There was work to be done, a team that believed in my vision, and a future limited only by my courage to pursue it. I had quit my job for my boyfriend. He had lost everything. And I had found myself. It wasn't the story I had expected to live, but it was mine, and that made all the difference.